which is good. What time is it in Chile now?
9 o'clock in the morning.
Okay. And what time is it in Singapore, Ping?
9 o'clock in the evening. We are 12 hours away.
Dude, that's amazing. And what it is, Jialong? What is in China?
It's also 9 o'clock.
Okay, so it's the same.
Evening. Yeah.
So it's the same time as Singapore, yeah. So it's amazing. There's 12 hours difference between Chile and where you are. You know, so that we have people all around the world, which is great. And I can see that people are popping in very slowly. And how is it still hot, Liv, in Norway, or is it not so hot?
It's a normal cold summer day.
It's a normal summer day.
Normal cold. About
Normal
15
cold
degrees.
summer. Okay, very good.
It's nice.
And are you on holidays now?
I'm at home. I just arrived home from Bilbao, you know.
Oh, yes.
Bilbao was very good, very good.
The Design Research Society conference?
Yes, it was
Okay.
good. We had the track there, you know.
Yeah, the design.
And it
Yeah,
was-
yeah. I've heard it was very good, apparently. I'm sorry I wasn't there. I also heard some people.
we missed you.
Yeah. Was there many people attended?
550 present, and then 250 online. It was
Amazing.
huge.
That's a big number of people. Yes.
Really big, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
So it was nice.
So I think we'll give it another maybe minute or two. There's people I can see they're kind of popping in and joining with audios and videos and so on, which is great. So and then we'll maybe kick off in a minute or two. Is that okay, Ursula?
Do we need to tell them to choose the language channel?
Yeah, in a second, because there's not everybody has joined yet. So
Okay.
I think if we maybe wait,
Fine.
because there's still
That's fine.
people are coming in. So I think it's better if we just wait. Otherwise, if people join later on, they would not know that what they need to do. Okay, so we maybe do that. And perhaps what might be useful is, would you like to? Are you typing, Jialong?
Pardon, please.
Are you typing, Jialong?
What?
Typing. Are you typing on your keyboard? Were you typing? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we could hear you typing. And from the keyboard strike, I know what you've typed.
Okay.
Because they make all different noise, you know. Because you know that's when you dial your phone, it makes it each key makes a different sound, so you can actually know what they have dialed up. So on the keyboard, you can listen to the keyboard, and you know what people are typing. That's okay. I mean, it's fine. So would you like to, Ursula? Would you like to share the interpretation slide, if you don't mind?
Of course.
Great.
Can you see?
Welcome, everyone. I just wanted to, my name is Eric Bohemia. I just wanted to welcome you to today's talk. And before we kick off, I just wanted to make sure that everyone is in the right channel, in an audio channel. So today's talk will be interpreted in English. Would be the talk given, but nevertheless, you still need to be in a right channel for English. It'll be interpreted into Spanish and Chinese. So if you could please select the right channel on your Zoom either application or the web application, so that you can hear the interpretation. And also, if you do ask question, you can ask question in your native language, and it can be then interpreted back to people who speak other languages. Jialong, would you like to just say the same thing, but for the people who speak Chinese, what they need to do, please? And then if you can pass it on to Ursula, and then Ursula, if you can pass it on to Leaf. Thank you.
好的，大家晚上好啊。我是山东工艺美术学院的于江龙，那么欢迎大家来参加我们这次的讲座。那么如果哪位老师需要同声传译服务的话，请点击屏幕下方的传译，然后选择中文，那么你就可以听到咱们的同声传译了。Let's enjoy. Thank you.
Ok. Repito para las personas hispanoparlantes, esta charla se dictará en inglés, tiene traducción al español y al chino. Solo tienen que seleccionar el canal correcto en el botón de interpretación en la parte inferior de la pantalla, suele estar en Zoom. Muchas gracias, que disfruten la charla. Ok. Liz?
Okay.
¿Sí? Adelante.
Hello and welcome to this event, Engage with Ideas, arranged by the Design Literacy International Network. Today we have invited Zhengping Liu, also called Ping, to present his ideas. A warm welcome to you, Ping. We're very much looking forward to your presentation titled Cross-Pollinative Team Learning, Recalibrating Power Structures in the Design Studios. And before we start, just a few words about the network and our events. We open up for engaged design researchers from all over the world to present their ideas once a month. And by doing so, we inform each other about design, literacy, meaning competencies within design and design education. We acknowledge our different backgrounds in different contexts of design and design education. In this network, we are building upon the ideas of the Brazilian educator Paulo Freire and his writings and practice in the 1970s. As then, competence is important for wise decisions, and wise decisions are of great importance if we want to move the world in a direction of a better and greener tomorrow. We have experienced how other fields of knowledge have developed their special competence, their literacies, such as health literacy, financial literacy, and eco-literacy. And we are planning to invite representatives from such literacies to present their ideas. Hopefully, we can learn something from them also. Today is our 20th event, and our presenter, Ping, is an educated architect, and he has been teaching for several years. He will say a bit more about his background, but before handing over the screen to Ping, I would just say that today's presentation will simultaneously be translated into both Spanish and Chinese, which we think is great. So thanks to Jasmine Silva and Laura Eraso at University of Design in Santiago, and also thanks to Ning Wang at Shandong University of Art and Design in China. So now, Ping, the screen is yours.
Thanks so much. I hope everybody can hear me clearly. Very nice meeting all of you. So just let me do the share screen. And I won't be able to see anyone now. Okay. Do you see a blank screen now? All right, yes. So I'll start there.
Sí, está perfecto.
Okay. So my name is Ping. You can just call me Ping. I have a background in architecture. So like many practitioners who I went on to teach, I've practicing for about 3-4 years. So I've been teaching for about 11 years. That sounds quite old. So I wasn't expecting to get a job. So I was pretty blessed to get a job. But my first day was quite memorable because I almost broke into cold sweat because I realized I'm going to teach design. And we all know how do we teach mathematics and science, but how then do we teach design? Because it is full of ambiguities and uncertainties. So like many practitioners, I've begun to teach the way I've been taught in my university. So it's a replication of my own experiences. So in my time as a level coordinator for the first year students, through all of these exit interviews, the students have shared with me that the reason for them to leave the course is the loss of interest as their main narrative. So when I asked a little bit further, I realized that it is because of their confusion with design. So specifically, the foreign teaching method that has been taught, and in this case is predominantly the master and apprentice pedagogical model. So as I was doing more reading about this through the works of Helena Webster and Thomas Dutton, so all of them have kind of identified the asymmetrical, unbalanced power structures in the design studio, and they are really of very little benefit to the students' learning. So henceforth, my journey in experimenting with this non-hierarchical learning pedagogical studio. So thanks everybody for coming. So before we move on, I'd really like to thank Liv, Eric and Ursula for this very kind opportunity for me to receive feedback for this work. So please note that each slide will be accompanied by a page number, is highlighted by a red arrow. So if you want to refer back to this slide, just take down the red arrows. I'll also put a link on the chat box. So this is where you can download the slides. Let me move on. Okay, this talk is based on a chapter from this book, Effective Design Critique Strategy Across Discipline. And my contribution to this book is called Started Right, a hierarchical studio pedagogy model for Gen Z learners. So it's really a documentation of all of my experiments when I was teaching. So we'll talk about 3 ideas. First, I'll describe the book chapter that will frame today's discussion. Then we'll focus on 4 learning attributes of the Gen Zs. Second, we'll be talking about, we're examining the dogmatic master and apprentice teaching model in architecture design studios and its negative effects. So lastly, we'll be talking about the cross-pollinative non-hierarchical learning model, almost like an antidote to the top-down hierarchical master and apprentice model, which is fairly ubiquitous in design studios worldwide. So, so this is the framing of the chapter really, so I'll just quickly run through. So as we transit into emerging economies and changes have compelled us to rethink pedagogy. But the role of design is projected to shift to play a key role in our economy towards knowledge production and dissemination. And therefore, the idea of working with adjacent and non-adjacent disciplines must be a mindset that has to be inculcated. So furthermore, we have also witnessed the power structures of design processes shifting from a very classical top-down model to a flattened non-hierarchical model in recent years. So with that, lifelong learning is projected to take on a significant role in the precarious future. So the whole idea of having a self-directed mindset is also a very important 21st century skill in the coming decades. Soft skills such as negotiation, emotional intelligence are advocated as essential attributes for the coming industrial revolution. But the real question is, how do we teach these non-cognitive skills? Can all of these skills be taught through a lecture, or they can be enculturated? So some things are taught, some things are caught. So in the aspects of the design studios, these are often referred to as the hidden curriculum. And who are the Gen Zs? So to date, very limited studies were conducted to understanding their learning attributes on what is really relevant to their learning. So this book chapter then collects secondary data and reclassifies them into 4 relevant categories, which is related to the studio pedagogy. So, so we have the outcome as number 4. So let us take a look at the slightly more detailed version. So don't let this scare you. The colors should be able to calm you down a little bit. So we went through, so number 3 will be the 4 categories of the Gen Z's learning attributes. So the resultant outcome will be impacting, the project brief, which is guided by the curriculum, as well as the pedagogy, which is then also has a very important part to play in the SRR framework. But for today, if you could forgive me, our journey will take a slight detour. We will still talk about the 4 learning characteristics of Gen Z learners, followed by a critique on the hierarchical master and apprentice design pedagogical model. So that will set the context in order for us to understand the relevance of the cross-pollinative team learning model of the SIR strategy. So here are the parameters for this session. First of all, Gen Z, they are students born between 1996 to 2012. And this work revolves around beginning design students for the first year architecture design studios. So, so these are the 4 main attributes that we have that has been surfaced. So we'll go through them briefly. So the resultant list is on the left. So the need for collaboration. So Gen Zs, they are pretty much indifferent to authority, but they are not impressed by working underneath a hierarchical structure, but not exactly in a defined way, but it indicates their willingness to collaborate. So despite their collaborativeness, if there's such a word, they are also excessively competitive and individualistic. Point number 2, their pursuit of meanings. So Gen Z see themselves as boundaryless citizens who are also passionate about issues like climate emergency. Agencies, as described as the ability to intervene, are paramount for them to understand what they want to do in their life, most importantly in the search of meaning in their lives as well. But they are also known to be an impatient bunch of people because they are born in the digital world. And especially in the post-truth era, they tend to trust whatever they read online without questioning the credibility that is online. So especially for beginning design students, they are accustomed to instantaneous Google searches, on-demand entertainment, and they tend to research online quickly for solutions for them to cut and paste desirable aesthetical qualities concealed under the term inspirations. And Gen Z's learners, they like to undergo a highly structured learning because they're highly monitored in their childhood. They prefer learning journeys which are very predictable, highly coordinated. So a clear projection of their next step is considered critical. So it's also argued that highly structured, a relatively stress-free childhood might have actually robbed them the confidence and the chance to learn from bad decisions. So let's move on to the next point, shall we? The detriments of the master and apprentice relational mode of teaching. So, what exactly is the master and apprentice model, which is really commonly found in architecture schools? So if you walk into a typical studio, this is probably what you might see. You will see something like this. The tutor will be having conversation with a student, one student, usually by themselves at the teacher's desk. The student might be talking to the tutors for 30, 40 minutes, hogging, and then the rest of the class remains unengaged. But the nature of the dialogue is really predominantly one way, as the students only gets corrective feedback with alternatives rarely explored. So if you might have remembered a little bit in terms of Gen Z's learning preferences, which has a lot to do with structured and coordinated learning, which are then predicated on certainties, which are then very antithetical to design education's pedagogy of ambiguity. So given such ambiguity, there are no dogmatic way to teach design. But strange enough, the pervasive master and apprentice model, which is then celebrated as mystery as mastery, a mode of teaching where knowledge is transferred in a very tacit manner, have managed to survive for decades, if not centuries. So this model began in the 1830s with the Beaux-Arts movement in France. So in those ateliers, students learned under the watchful eyes of their master. So mimicry was at the heart of the pedagogy. So moving on to the workshops of the Bauhaus, although the environment has changed, but the mode of learning becomes more intensive by having 2 instructors, and the kind of hierarchical model remains unchallenged. So the same could be said for the unit systems, which is now commonly found in architecture schools worldwide. And most importantly, at the core of the master and apprentice model is a very simplistic punishment or reward principle, so that the masters either agrees or disagree, which then discourages the individual thinking and innovation out of fear that the master will disapprove. So the asymmetrical power structures are strengthened through the inculcation of non-cognitive value systems into the learners through the hidden curriculum. And Frescara, who has spoken last year in July, highlighted that the masters were unable to clearly articulate their guiding principles have reduced design pedagogies to just mimicry. So he have added, mimicry is easy. Just follow what the master has said and replicate it. But those people who learn through mimicry, they will never be culture builders. So there are basically three kinds of master-apprentice relational model. So we have the first one, the brutal authoritarian, the benign authoritarian, and the reversal authoritarian. So we'll be going through them one at a time. So we'll go through the first one first, which is, sorry, I lost my slides. The first variant, the COVID language, the first variant. So we are going to discuss the brutal authoritarian first, which is then characterized by strict compliance, predominantly explicit commands and knowledge transfer. So it's a method which is very explicitly driven compared to the very tacit method of the benign authoritarian. So this is nothing new because recently there was almost like a storm. So the Guardian has reported that last year that UCL Bartlett School of Architecture, one of their ex-students have complained of racism and sexism dating back a decade ago. So in fact, when you read the report, it spans back almost 3 decades ago. So the headlines reveals a more telling story like toxic learning environment, teaching culture. But these are not shocking. It's almost like an open secret because none of us were shocked because he have accurately described the state of pedagogy over at the Bartlett School. Zooming to the report a little bit, one of the main theme that has emerged is the culture of fear, a very important theme. So the operation of threats and fears, whereby fears is being used to motivate the students to work extremely hard. And students felt that the teachers are very biased in terms of doing their reviews. And this oppression are ongoing in the studios, and students themselves have normalized such behaviors. They are also mimicking their tutors in instilling fear amongst one another. So the process of being socialized into the environment, into enculturation. So exactly this has described the idea of the hidden curriculum at work. The enculturation of values and behaviors and value systems. Lastly, the power imbalance created by the tutors within the unit systems have conveniently set up a series of abuse with lasting emotional and physical damages on the students for many years. The oppressive studio culture over at Bartlett is not something which is unique, because the vice president for the Royal Institute of British Architects, the student chapter, have went through her observations and conversations with students with many schools, and she too have arrived at a similar conclusion. So SIAC in the United States have got it recently, got into trouble, and the same with regards to the same issues of power structures. And the unit systems, which is also found in the National University of Singapore, which probably suffer the same fate. So a casual conversation with one of my former students, felt that his peers and himself followed the tutor's instruction out of fear and anger, So it resembles a typical section out from the Bartlett report. But of course, like the golden rule of statistics, correlation doesn't equate to causation, but it is a very telling story. The benign authoritarian. So for this, it is more tacit, it is less explicit in a way. So I'm going to screen this video if I may. It's going to take less than 3 minutes, and Savoy Zizek would explain it in a much better way than I do. So,
of course, I have nothing against the fact.
Can you all hear? All right.
That your boss treats you in a nice way and so on. The problem is if this not only covers up the actual relationship of power, but makes it even more impenetrable. If you have a boss who is up there, the old-fashioned boss, shouting at you, exerting full brutal authority, in a way it's much easier to rebel than to have a friendly boss who embraces you, or how was the last night with your girlfriend, blah, blah, all that body stuff, where then it almost appears impolite to protest. But I will give you an example, an old story that I often use to make it clear what do I mean by this. imagine you or me, I am a small boy, it's Sunday afternoon, my father wants me to visit our grandmother. Let's say my father is a traditional authority. What would he be doing? He would probably tell me something like, I don't care how you feel, it's your duty to visit your grandmother. Be polite to her, and so on. Nothing bad about this, I claim, because I can still rebel and so on. It's a clear order. But what would the so-called modern, non-authoritarian father do? I know because I experienced it. He would have said something like this. You know how much your grandmother loves you, but nonetheless, I'm not forcing you to visit her. You should only visit her if you freely decide to do it. Now, every child knows that beneath the appearance of free choice, there is a much stronger pressure in this second message. Because basically, your father is not only telling you you must visit your grandmother, but you must love to visit it. It's, he tells you how you must feel about it. It's a much stronger order. And I think that this is, for me, almost a paradigm of modern permissive authority. This is why the formula of totalitarianism is not, I don't care what you think, just do it. This is traditional authoritarianism. The totalitarian formula is, I know better than you what you really want. And I may appear to be forcing you to do it, but I'm really just making you do what without fully knowing you want, and so on and so on. So in this sense, yes, I am horrified by this.
So, excuse me. So I think he has explained a little bit so much clearer than what I'm trying to do. So there are differences between the brutal authority as well as the benign authoritarian. So especially I suspect that the tyranny will still continue after the Bartlett report, but in a more passive aggressive way, disguised under the cover of free choice. Coercing will no longer be associated with brutal oppression, but will continue to perpetuate in a very gentle manner. So on the final one, this is a little bit tricky to explain. This is the reversal authoritarian. So, but just to recap a little bit, the benign authoritarian and the reversal authoritarian, both of these models shelters the students from the discomfort of the learning process. And I do suspect that it will also be interpreted as good teaching from the students. So this picture we are quite familiar with, at least until now. So the master is someone who guides the student, and the students are looking a little bit sad. But for the reversal authoritarian, very obviously the tables have turned. Students will be taking over the role of the oppressor. The master and apprentice metaphor describes the power imbalance, relationship of power, but it is all discussed within the context of knowledge transfer. So in the reversal authoritarian, it is about the exertion of power and influence to the advantage of the student. Greg Lukianoff and Jonathan Haidt, they have written a book called The Codelink of the American Mind. They have highlighted that college students are increasingly fragile, and they have sought protection from uncomfortable ideas and concepts and interactions. So rather than to keep students to help them to confront their discomfort, universities have gradually gapped into their demands with the creation of safe spaces, trigger warnings, excessively coddling them in a very overprotective manner. So on a micro level, tutors are also often pressured to give in to students' wishes, lest they want to receive low teacher ratings and complaints from their parents through the program's administrators. So this phenomenon is also observed and prevalent in many countries outside the United States now. So there are two implications of the master and apprentice model. Number one, surface learning. So the breeding of passive learners with surface learning inevitably will happen. So Helena Webster in her paper have described students to survive the master and apprentice studio by pretending to understand what their tutors have suggested. So rather than to defend their schemes in a respectful way, these students simply adhered to the instructions faithfully in order to survive through the semesters. So if you take a look at the surface learning table, it accurately describes it. So they are motivated by fear, which then their inability to extract the guiding principles of good design and just focusing on the formal outcomes, so that their projects will look good, but not necessarily work well. Implication number 2, increased anxieties and threats to the mental well-being. In 2018, there was a master's thesis done in Sheffield, which examined architecture students' mental well-being. So the numbers don't lie. So as compared to normal students, they are considered to be highly stressed out. And do remember that these numbers are pre-COVID era. So 38% of university students have experienced moments of panic attack, compared to 81% as reported by architecture students. In terms of anxiety, we have fared no better. 86% of architecture students are constantly suffering from anxiety, compared to 55% from students from other disciplines. So, a school counselor and a psychologist at Cornell University have made the same notes in his session with architecture students in distress. So this is what has been recorded. Things like, I feel that my existence is based on clever acting, a great injustice has been done. So if you feel resentment, so there's a good formula for tragedy to happen. So would you like to guess which year this paper is published? Not in the 2000s, not even in 1980s. It is in 1964. 1964 to today, 2022, 58 years in between. The studio pedagogy has been plagued by the master and apprentice model. Well, one could actually argue that the master and apprentice model has already cemented its dominance in the Beaux-Arts period. So that's about a couple of hundred years. But all in all, true dialogue only happens between equals. Hierarchical structures prevent genuine dialogues. So the apprentice will not speak their mind for the fear of disappointment and punishment, while the master only listens in a tokenistic manner so that he can keep his power intact. So we have went through Gen Z's learning traits. We have talked a little bit about the master and apprentice pedagogy. So let's move on to the cross-pollinative team learning that is really responding to both of these issues at hand. So with inevitable power that design tutors has been bestowed with, what could be our subsequent actions? So the solution is not that complex. It is the recalibration of the power structures, which then mimics a natural phenomenon which is called cross-pollination. So cross-pollination occurs a lot in nature and is about the transferring of pollen between two flowers by an external pollinator. So the key idea we're talking about here is the external pollinator. So in the case of the design pedagogy, tutors models behavior as well as the methods of asking relevant questions, and at the same time, a flattened hierarchical environment creates a space where ideas could be debated and, most importantly, failures to be normalized. So in fact, academic cross-pollination is nothing new. In fact, they will be probably understood as cross-disciplinary and transdisciplinary pedagogies of today. In 2006, an article by Harvard Business School, advocated the merits of the system. So if I could remove the description, which is then more relevant to the CTL pedagogy. So students from diverse disciplines learning from one another. So in the context of the year one students, it will be something like this. Students from diverse disciplines from their high schools, from the different backgrounds, different life experiences, most importantly, different spatial perceptions, learning through teaching and critiquing one another's design works in progress. So that pretty much sums up CTL. I would like to briefly talk about the 4 keys of the CTL design pedagogy, their corresponding actions, as well as their intentions. So number 1, the visible pedagogical framework. So simply by shifting away from the weekly pin-up, shifting away from the one-on-one desk grids, tutors can take seat with the students, not at the teacher's desk. So sitting together with the students, working together in groups. In this case, you can group them in groups of 4 so that they can explore a common design trajectory. So this kind of semi-permanent work group encourages students to extend their discussions together, even the tutorials have ended. So just simply sitting together with students would helpfully engage the non-participating students in the studio. Number 2, the hidden curriculum. So much empathy has to be extended for our first year student. So we as tutors can teach with phrases that sought to normalize failures as well as to capitalize on the tacit-driven hidden curriculum to install all of these non-cognitive skills and mindsets as well. So tutors can also demonstrate the different ways of learning, asking relevant questions. So it is then acted out almost like an actor in the studio through the hidden curriculum. So hopefully, some things are taught, some things are caught. Students then can catch on to the ways of asking and thinking during their self-directed peer-to-peer design discussions. Number 3, hierarchical relationships. So the tutors should be able to guide as a neutral facilitator simply by encouraging the students to discuss their friend schemes, breeds a kind of co-creation culture, therefore suppresses the individualistic environment that causes much academic stress. The last key, social support. Tutors can also capitalize moments of ambiguities for an impromptu cross-pollinative exercise when the discussion comes to a standstill. Students will collectively help with one another in their brainstorming of design options. And most importantly, decisions are also mostly made together as a group. So this in turn builds up the social support and finds support in times of distress. So a very quick recap again. So we spoke about the 4 ideas of Gen Z's learner's trait, 3 kinds of master and apprentice model with 2 implications. And then we have moved on to a very hierarchical driven cross-pollinative team learning model. So the benefits as documented in the paper will be, they are usually in the cross-pollinative group, they will outperform the one-on-one group academically. And if you could trust me on this, because I have conducted interviews for 3 years, but I have not coded it. So generally they enjoy the kind of well-being, they're less stressful than the one-on-one peers. So that marks the end of this very lengthy session. So if you please keep in touch. Maybe you could extend this conversation beyond this session. And so much thanks to the interpreters. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Ping. And yeah, if you have any questions, do use the chat to either to let us know that you would like to ask question to Ping, or you can type the question there. But there's a time to have a conversation with Ping now. I'll kick off, Ping, and my question is, if you go to your example, I mean, I was intrigued with your example, and just out of interest, is there, the people around the names around the table, they're very gender dominated. Is there some reason that you excluded a certain gender from your example? Sorry, can't hear you, Ping.
Okay, sorry. It is non-gender bias. It just happens that I was thinking about the name, so I copied the name of my the members of my favorite rock band.
I see. And what sort of rock band was this?
It's Guns N' Roses.
Okay, I see. Oh, great. That's a good story to know. We've been able to uncover a little bit about your musical interest. Ursula, would you like to come in? You might have experienced this yourself when you were students in your old days, and you might have also, Ursula, experienced this as a lecturer now, and see what your colleagues do and how they deliver their classes.
Bien, bueno, Ping, muchas gracias por tu presentación. A mí me parece fascinante poner la mirada sobre las relaciones de poder dentro del aula. Creo que eso no está tan abordado en el mundo, bueno, no lo hemos incorporado en verdad, no lo habíamos tenido en las charlas de Design Literacy, pero me parece que es fundamental porque uno de nuestros focos, como decía Liv hace un rato, era esta relación de poder y cómo el diseño puede enfrentar eso. Entonces, focalizar la mirada en las relaciones de poder dentro del aula y del profesor con los estudiantes me parece muy necesario. Y me preguntaba, por ejemplo, a raíz de tu presentación, es cómo entrenar a instructores para ser facilitadores neutrales Cuando hay, por ejemplo, contenidos de repente más, contenidos duros, vamos a llamar, que los estudiantes deben incorporar. En arquitectura será las cosas relacionadas con cálculo, estructuras materiales, por ejemplo, donde las habilidades blandas podrían tener menos espacio y la creación también menos espacio. ¿Cómo lo has visto tú?
Okay, I have to write it down so that I don't lose my train of thoughts. Getting very slow these days. So the first one, you are absolutely right, because I was, as I'm trying to build up my literature in terms of understanding the power structures, the literatures are quite modest in bulk. They are quite modest. And the very famous paper, not famous paper, the very informative paper was by Thomas Dutton. So that literally opened up my eyes. But that paper was like in the 1990s. So when I search around, and subsequently some researchers latched onto the idea, people like Helena Webster's. So I think it is slowly catching up. But if you realize a little bit that the idea of power structures is not exactly a sexy research topic, because as much as the Bartlett report has demonstrated, the power structure need not be disturbed, because don't reinvent the wheel when nothing is wrong. In fact, everything is wrong. It's just that it has not been surfaced. And I don't know, perhaps I'm one of the odd one who's just being crazy. The second question, this is also a very good question, and I have been also struggling to rationalize this, because one idea of research is the replicability of research. So and pedagogy, if we are terribly honest with ourselves, they are very private practices. So so it is almost impossible for me to impose this kind of teaching method to my, like, for example, to my colleagues. Yeah, so but I've realized that one way to probably in a tyrannical way to streamline towards such model, it is through the design of the brief. So if the brief is being written in a way where you intentionally write up moments where students need to cross-pollinate and to be able to document their processes as well as their thoughts, that could probably help to structure and to build up the kind of socialization process towards a more equitable learning environment. So it's through the design brief, I think.
That was a really good question and good example, Charla. Thank you very much, and Ping for trying to address. Yeah, it is difficult, and I would add to this also. It's not just the issue around within the class, but I guess what happens is once you introduce these sort of power relationships in a class, and the future designers are conditioned these sort of power relationships, then what happens is they bring this into the practice. So when they do work, for example, with users or in the workplace, then there's this power structure they bring with them. And so what it means is then it's very difficult, I guess, to bring a user-centered design, because it becomes actually a design-centered rather than user-centered, because the designer knows better. And it's not necessarily that's what they want. It's just because that's how they've been conditioned, over 3, 4, or 5, or how many years, the studies they go for. So, it has an implication, I think, also, for future of the profession. So this is very much so something actually, thinking about design doing good or being good, for society and for, the world. I think there's lots for us to consider. Liv, would you like to come in?
Yes, please. First, thank you, Ping. Very interesting, a very nice presentation. I totally agree with you on this, the negative effect of the hierarchical master apprentice, as you described. this has been much discussed in Norway also. But in a way, I think that some of the Norwegian discussion to solve this has some of the same in it as you call cross-pollinative team learning. But we have used a researcher called Etienne Wenger. He is sort of describing how you learn in the community of practice, where you are sort of cooperating on an issue, but at the same time, there is always someone who knows more than the others. So in a way, it's not totally equal, but it is in an atmosphere of, I'm not quite sure if it's right to call it a master apprentice, but the master apprentice way of learning, as if parents, children learn from their parents through their practice. So in a way, I find it difficult to just say that all apprentice master is negative per se, because in a way, this is how we learn. So in a way, I can give an example from Norway. In the 1970s, there was a big debate on equalizing education, and the teachers withdraw, at least in art and design education, so that there was almost nothing to learn. So the pupils should always take everything from their own heart, develop everything from basic, and that's a very heavy burden to put on either architectural students or youngsters in primary, lower secondary, and high school. So I think this balance, which I think you try to describe by this cross-pollinative team learning, has something to do with this collaboration. But my question is, do you see apprentice, master apprentice as totally negative? Is my question.
Very good question. Sorry. Eric, let me address your comments for a while first. So you talked about, but this has been a problem since many years, because the students graduate, go out to work, and most importantly, they go back to the schools to teach. So the value systems gets on regurgitating itself perpetuates through the system, which is why, Jeremy too has always mentioned that architecture education is deeply conservative, because we just pretend that everything is okay through this kind of socialization. Liv, yes, this model has very strong linkages to communities of practice, and the mechanisms are for if I could study a little bit more, I think they're pretty much identical. Okay, but your last question is a very important question, because whenever I've discussed the master and apprentice model, I could see some of my colleagues getting quite upset with me. In the PDF that I pushed out just now, towards the back, there's a couple of slides which I do not have the time to go through. And one of the slides is about the master and apprentice model, the relevance of the master and apprentice model. So if I could remember what I've typed, it is that I think that the master and apprentice model, especially, let's contextualize this argument within design education. I think there are still merits, there's still a place for the master and apprentice pedagogy, but only with reference to tasks which are repetitive of technical skill sets. So for example, if I were to teach a student how to do a certain kind of projection, so I will put on my master's hat and tell them, hey, the way you have projected this is wrong. So there's no dispute about it. What is wrong is wrong. So then it moves on to corrective actions. No forms of alternative, because there's only one way of projection. So if we are instilling skills that they are hard skills, like what Ursula has mentioned just now, calculus, So all of this where it's predicated on certainties, then I think the master's role to come in for refinement will be super useful. It is just that if we push out this model, the corrective model, to say that, no, your building must be square. And then you push it out to within the pedagogy of uncertainties, ambiguity, then lies the problem. Yeah. So I think there's still a place for the master and apprentice. It's just different scenarios, different applicational situation.
Thank you so much. I think this to study these educational models just within architecture might be very interesting to do from different countries, from different point of views. We have some interesting studies also in Norway about the architectural education, and it's different at different schools. So it was very nice to hear from your point of view. Thank you.
Yeah, and
so please send the links to me.
There's a question from Wenging In. Would you mind to come in and ask your question, Wen?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Great. Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Excuse me for not turning on my camera. It's not working on this computer of mine. I would just like to maybe ask Ping to elaborate a little on the possible challenges and pitfalls for someone, for an instructor, I suppose, who, by virtue of being older and knowing more, how would you be able to lead students in a non-hierarchical learning method, and how maybe one can overcome the temptations to turn it into a directive mode of learning?
Thanks so much, Wally. So the pitfalls. Definitely, if someone who is, well, not anybody, even I'm still experiencing pitfalls. So it is definitely not a super foolproof model. But coming back to your question, right? Never mind if you're more experienced, and never mind if you're older. But the whole idea, because if you rationalize a little bit, right, to lead in a studio is all about listening. And some great wise men will say that, do you listen to answer or do you listen to understand? So most of the time we are too quick. We listen to answer because we are quite, we wanted to be the good teacher who gives who dispenses solution, which is quite natural of us to do. So if I could particularly share my own experiences, is that I will bite my lips, I will bite my tongue, I will listen to them, and most of the time, I hope none of my students are here, I'll act blur. I will pretend that I don't know anything. I just want to listen to them, and then I'll just ask another student on the table, so what do you think? But sometimes I really don't understand what they're talking about, but sometimes I do. And in most of the occasions, I try to act as if I don't really understand, so that they can try to verbalize more. So there's a chance for them to explain it in greater depth. And yeah, so I try to listen to understand, and I try to shut my mouth and try to listen to them. But like even when Leaf just now talked about that, so internally there's also a struggle, as much as I advocated that there should be a flattened hierarchy. But the problem is that somewhere, sometime, there has to be a hierarchy. In the sense that, when the discussion is going to planet Mars, going nowhere, so I need to bring them up together to say that, okay, let us talk sense, and then we try to zoom into a sensible solution. So I guess the role of the tutor is extremely complicated, and I'm still teach with fear and trepidation every time I go into a studio. But to answer your question is to just refrain myself of it and listen to them. Sometimes they surprise you. Sometimes they they make everybody cringe, make everybody laugh. But that's the design studio, isn't it? Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ping. I think we're going to wrap up very briefly,
Yeah.
and just a note, maybe. I mean, in China, for example, the rise of design has been very rapid for the past 2 decades, and it would be really nice to maybe hear from Jialong, from SOAD, from perspective of international office, thinking about these issues of, teaching and education of design, at your university, and how these sort of issues, are they, are in what ways they are being addressed or not being addressed, at your university. What are your thoughts, Jialong?
非常感谢瑞克教授啊，给我这一次机会。但是呢，实际上来说呢，就是说，我觉得我听了这个就是郑平溜的这个他的演讲，那么他的这个教学和我们国内这个教学是非常不一致的，就是不一样的。那么就是说，咱们平时的时候，大部分的工作室呢，还是开展的话，我觉得还是在那个就是传统的工作室这种师徒制的比较多一点。当然呢，也是有这样一个机会哈。我希望呢，就是说我们在我们学校也有很多老师呢，对这个就是对郑平的这个观点呢，非常的感兴趣，也希望能够展开一些探讨。那么，并且呢，也希望就是郑平溜呢，能够和我们的学生能开展一些工作室，那么就是在这方面呢，展开更深入的一些研究，也非常期待啊。Yes, Eric, I think that's all for that.
Yes, tradition is something that is impossible to shake off. One great philosopher told us that tradition is the forgetting of the origin. I can't remember who said that. I'm so sorry. But each of our own institution, each of our own studios, we do face challenges. So for mine, it is the increase in student teaching ratio. So I don't know about you folks, but my teaching ratio is 1:19. In NUS, National University of Singapore, if I'm not mistaken, it's about 1:8 or 1:9. So our teaching ratio are vastly different. So there is almost a push factor for at least for me to not to go through the one-on-one, because it's I'll be dead by then. I'll be crawling on the floor out of the studio. But teaching ratio.
That was, thank you so hold on. Thank you so much, Ping, for really good presentation, and I think it gave us lots of thinking about how we practice our pedagogical approaches and what they can result in. And I just would like to remind to everyone that our next talk will be in September, on 6th of September on Tuesday, and we'll have Linda Keane. She's a professor at the School of Arts and Institute of Chicago, and she'll be discussing, her talk is titled Place-Based Literacy, which is very much so, a link to kind of builds on what Ping was talking about. It's about how, we can engage as students, in understanding in spaces and have a better understanding of their impact on lives of people and the environment they live in. So thank you very much, everybody who have joined with us today, and really good questions also that came from the audience, and we are looking forward to seeing you then in September. And also we'll be conducting another talk then on October and November, December. So hopefully you'll be able to join us then. And don't forget, these talks have been recorded, so you can look at the past talks on the Design Literacy International Network. And we are looking forward to seeing you again in 2 months, in September. In the meantime, if you are in the Northern Hemisphere, we wish you, a very nice summer. If you are in Southern Hemisphere, we wish you a very nice winter. So, and all the best where you are, and keep it safe. And thank you very much for the interpreters again, who've done marvelous jobs. So thank you, Ning, Laura, and Yasmin, and also Pia for, getting all the things kind of working out. So it's great. Thank you so much, everybody. And have a lovely evening or morning where you are. And I will catch up with you in September. Bye-bye, Ping.
Bye, everybody. Bye-bye. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ling, Ping. Nice presentation.
Thanks a lot. See you, everybody. Bye-bye.